All right. So today we are starting in Book 4, Discourse 24. We just finished Pritu Lila, which was covered the last 2 weeks entirely. And there's really just one kind of story cycle left in Book 4. So we're starting it here in this discourse on the hymn sung by Lord Shiva and taught to the Prachetas. Maitreya began again. So we just ended with Pratu, the Pratu Avatarana ending and Pratu leaving the earth. Pratu's son, Vijitashva of great renown, became the emperor, succeeding his father. Full of fraternal love, he gave to his younger brothers a quarter each of the earth's surface, since he had 4 younger brothers. So all of them are going to be kind of under him as the high king or emperor. And they're kind of his, underlings. To Haryaksha, the emperor assigned the eastern quarter. To Dhumrakesha, the southern, to the one known as Vrka, the western, and the 4th quarter to Dravina. Having acquired from Indra, the lord of paradise, the secret of invisibility, he, Vijitashva, earned the surname of Antardhana. So he was called Vijitashva Antardhana. Through his wife Shikandini, he begot 3 sons who were highly esteemed, Pavaka, Pavamana, and Shuchi. They were fire gods formerly. Born as humans under the curse of the sage Vasishta, they attained once more to the glorious state of fire gods by practicing yoga. Antardhana, who had refused to strike Indra even though he had come to know that Indra had stolen the horse in his father's 100th Ashvamedha Yajna, got a 4th son, Havirdhana, by his other wife, Nabhasvati. Under the pretext of a protracted sacrificial session, he relinquished the kingly duties, regarding them as cruel, and that they involved exacting tributes, inflicting punishment, and levying taxes, and so on. Even though occupied with that sacrificial session, so in other words, he started performing a yajna, and because he didn't like the job of being a raja, because it involves making hard choices that make life harder for some people and make some people unhappy, inevitably, even the best ruler, you're not going to be pleasing everybody. Because he didn't like the job, he just kept on continuing the yajna because he didn't want to go back to the regular job. So even though so occupied, the king adored the Supreme Spirit, who is perfect and ends the suffering of his votaries, and attained a residence in the same heaven with the Lord by dint of thorough and uninterrupted concentration of mind. In other words, attained a residence in the same heaven means attained salokya moksha, the type of moksha in which you remain a distinct individual and go dwell in Vaikunta or in whatever the loka of your Ishta Devata is. Through Havirdhana, Ovidura, Havirdhani, apparently his wife took his name, or is sometimes just called after him, bore 6 sons, Barhishad, Gaya, Shukla, Krishna, not the Krishna, but someone named Krishna, Satya, and Jitavrata. Of them, the highly blessed Barhishad, the eldest son of Havirdhana, became the ruler. He was well versed in the sections of the Veda dealing with the rituals, as well as in the methods of yoga, a worthy scion of Kuru. As a result of his performing sacrifices close to the place enclosed for each foregoing sacrifice, the entire land was covered with blades of kusha grass with their pointed ends turned toward the east. So this refers to, in old Vedic yajnas, planting plants used to be part of the whole procedure, especially kusha grass. You would cast seeds of kusha grass to the wind. And so saying the whole land became covered with kusha grass as a way of just saying how many yajnas he performed all over the place, that so many kusha grass seeds got sown. They do tend to point east because they try to catch the sunlight. He married Shatadruti, a daughter of the deity presiding over the ocean, recommended by Brahma, who was charming in every limb and was still very young, and for whom the fire god conceived a passion the moment he saw her going round the fire during the nuptials, meaning during their wedding, when you do the saptapadi, the 7 steps around the fire, richly bedecked with ornaments, even as he did for Shuki. That refers to another story in which, on another time, Agni Deva, one of the Agni Devas, became infatuated with a woman who was in sight of a fire. Nay, even other gods, demons, or devas, asuras, gandharvas, sages, siddhas, human beings, and nagas in every quarter were captivated by the newly married bride, producing a tinkling sound with her anklets. 10 sons were born to King Prachinabarhi. He got the name Prachinabarhi because of his having covered the earth's surface with kusha grass, through his wife Shatadruti. They bore the common name of Pracheta, meaning that these 10 sons all kind of had the family name or surname Pracheta. Their mode of life was the same, and they were all fully conversant with the moral code. Enjoined by their father to beget children, they entered a lake for austerities, and having duly controlled their mind, worshipped Sri Hari, the Lord of austerities, through asceticism for 10,000 years, contemplating on and adoring him, and muttering what had been imparted to them by Lord Shiva, whom they had met on the way to this lake where they're doing this tapas, and who had showered his grace on them. Vidura said, "Pray tell me, O holy sage, how came about the meeting of the Prachetas with Lord Shiva on the way, and what significant precept Lord Hara, the destroyer of the universe, was pleased to impart to them?" Namaste, Ian. Thanks for joining. It is indeed difficult for mortals, O Brahmana sage, to get an opportunity to meet Lord Shiva, on whom sages have only been able to contemplate as the cherished object of their desire by shaking off all attachment. Though reveling in the self, Lord Bhava, the source of all creation, goes about in the world associated with his terrible destructive energy in the person of goddess Shiva, for the maintenance, that's a form of Parvati, or in a terrible destructive form, Kali, for the maintenance of the world order. Maitreya went on. Having received their father's command with bowed heads, the pious Prachetas set out in a westerly direction with their mind earnestly set on austerities. They saw a very large lake, almost extensive as a sea, and pellucid as the mind of an exalted soul, with the creatures inhabiting it cheerful. A home of blue and red lilies, lotuses, kahlaras, which are the dusk-blooming lilies, and blue lotuses. The lake resounded with the notes of swans, cranes, chakravakas, which are ruddy geese, and karandavas, which are a type of duck. Hemmed in by creepers and trees, which were thrilled with joy to hear the sweet humming of drunken bees, it presented a gala appearance due to the breeze scattering in all directions the pollen from the seed vessel of the lotuses. The princes were wonderstruck to hear music, which ravished the mind by its weird style, and was preceded by the sound of clay and wooden tom-toms. That very moment they were filled with curiosity to behold the dark-necked and three-eyed Lord Shiva, the foremost of the gods, refulgent like a mass of red-hot gold, and inclined to shower his grace, issuing from the lake with his retinue, his glories being sung by Gandharvas and Kinnaras, and the princes bowed to him. The Lord, who relieves the agony of his suppliants and is a lover of righteousness, gladly spoke to the princes, who were not only well versed in the moral code, but possessed a noble character and felt delighted at his sight. Sri Rudra said, "You are the sons of King Vedishad," another way of saying Barhishad, their father's name. "Your intention, too, is known to me. It is only to shower my grace on you, may all be well with you, that I have thus blessed you with my sight. He is indeed dear to me, who has directly taken refuge in Lord Vasudeva, who is beyond both the unmanifest, consisting of the 3 gunas, and the spirit known by the name of Jiva. A man devoted to his own duty, or his svadharma, attains to the position of Brahma the creator after 100 lives, and realizes me if he has acquired still higher merit. A devotee of the Lord, on the other hand, ascends immediately after death to the abode of Bhagavan Vishnu, which lies entirely beyond the realm of matter, and which myself and the Devas shall reach after the dissolution of our subtle body. Now you are all devotees of the Lord, and as such are dear to me as the Lord, and to the votaries of the Lord either. No one else is ever dearer than myself. Now distinctly hear this holy and supremely auspicious hymn, which is also conducive to final beatitude or moksha. I hereby impart it to you. Maitreya resumed. With a heart full of compassion, Lord Shiva, who is devoted to Bhagavan Narayana, spoke the following words to those princes who stood with joined palms. Sri Rudra said, "Your glory tends to the blessedness of the foremost among the knowers of the self. May it conduce to my blessedness as well." He's obviously addressing this to Narayana rather than to the Prachetas who he's teaching it to. You ever exist as the supremely blissful. Hail to you, the spirit, who have assumed all forms. Obeisance to him who has a lotus sprung from his navel, the controller of the subtle elements and the senses. To Vasudeva, who is tranquil, immutable, and self-luminous. Salutations to, so Vasudeva is the first of the 4 vyuhas manifestations, the one who presides over the chitta, or the faculty of reason. Salutations to Sankarshana, the second of the 4 vyuhas that presides over the ego, who is unmanifest and infinite and destroys the universe. And to Pradyumna, the 3rd vyuha, from whom comes the highest knowledge of the world and who presides over the intellect or understanding. Hail, hail to Aniruddha, the 4th of the Chaturvyuha, presiding over the mind, which is the controller of the sense. Obeisance to you as the sun god, who pervades the universe by his effulgence. Now, a word that's often used for the universe here is Brahmanda, which, when we get to descriptions of the Brahmanda, seems to mean more the solar system. So that would make sense, the sun god who pervades the solar system by his effulgence, and is devoid of growth and decay. Salutations to him who is the door to heaven and final beatitude, and who constantly dwells in a pure heart. Hail to the fire god, through whom are accomplished sacrifices performed with the help of 4 priests. The Hota, Advarya, Udgata, and Brahma priests, the 4 categories of Vedic Brahmins, and who makes for the continuance of sacrifices. Obeisance to Sri Hari, the Lord of the 3 Vedas, who as the moon god, the seed of Yajna, serves as the food of both the Pitris and the Devas in the Svadha and Svaha offerings, respectively. And salutations to the Lord, who in the form of water gratifies all embodied beings. Salutations to you who appear as the bodies of all living beings, as well as the cosmic body, and take the form of earth. Hail to you who as the wind gods sustain all the 3 worlds and are endowed with the strength of mind, senses, and body. Obeisance to the Lord, who as ether supplies a clue to objects and provides a basis for the conception of inside and outside. Salutations to him in the form of that sacred sphere of great splendor, which is taken to be a reference to heaven. Hail to you in the form of worldly activity and activity carried on in retirement, leading severally to the world of the Pitris and the region of the Devas, and also in the form of death, which is the fruit of unrighteousness and causes pain. Obeisance to you, O Lord, who yield the fruit of all actions and are omniscient, or who are revealed in the form of mantras. Salutations to you in the form of Sri Krishna, who is supreme virtue personified and is possessed of unobstructed wisdom, nay, who is the most ancient person, the Lord of both Sankhya and Yoga. Hail to you who as Rudra himself says, preside over the ego and are endowed with the 3 potencies. Obeisance to you who as Brahma, the creator, are knowledge and activity personified, and from whom proceeds the vast wealth of speech. Jai Shri Krishna Radha. No problem being late. All right. Rudra continues. Pray bless us, who are keen to behold you with your sight, which is held in such great esteem by your devotees. Be pleased to reveal to us your beautiful form, the most beloved of your votaries, which delights all the senses by its excellences. It is cerulean as a charming rain cloud, and the conglomeration of all elegance. It has 4 long, graceful arms and a winsome countenance, perfect in every detail. It has eyes resembling the petals and the heart of a lotus, captivating eyebrows and a shapely nose, lovely teeth, ravishing cheeks and mouth, and ears exactly corresponding with each other and serving as ornaments. With the outer corners of its eyes smiling as it were with affection. Your form is decked with tresses, is covered by a shining fine cloth, yellow as the filaments of a lotus, and is adorned with a pair of polished earrings. It is graced with a brilliant diadem, bracelets, a pearl necklace, anklets, and girdle, and its glory is heightened by a conch, a discus, a mace, a lotus, those are what his 4 hands hold, a garland, and gems. It carries about its shoulders, resembling those of a lion, the luster of the earrings and necklace, etc., the kaustubha gem, lending charm to its neck, and the form is brightened by the bosom, which outshines the touchstone by goddess Sri, ever abiding thereon, in the form of the golden Srivatsa mark on Narayana's chest. Its belly, resembling the leaf, specifically the leaf of the Indian fig tree, the pipal tree, looks attractive with its folds, which are shaking with the inhalation and exhalation of air. By its deep navel, spiral in shape like a whirlpool, it is inviting the universe to return. The fine loincloth and the girdle of gold shine all the more brightly on the swarthy hips. The form looks comely by its beautiful feet, shanks, thighs, and depressed knees or dimpled knees, each pair matching perfectly. With your feet shining as the petals of an autumnal lotus and driving away the darkness of our heart by the splendors of their nails, pray reveal to us that form as your very essence that has dispelled the fear, O preceptor, since you are the guide of souls wallowing in ignorance. This form is worthy of being constantly meditated upon by those who seek the purification of their mind, for it is the practice of its adoration which brings fearlessness to those who perform their own duty, or their svadharma. Sought after even by Brahma, who rules over heaven, and the goal of those who are exclusively devoted to self-realization, you are attainable by him who is full of devotion and are difficult of access to all mortals. Having propitiated through exclusive devotion, hardly attainable even by the virtuous, you who cannot be easily propitiated, who will seek anything other than the soles of your feet. Though destroying the universe even with his brows contracted as a token of his majesty and energy, death does not recognize the soul who has taken shelter under those feet as subject to his authority. I am not prepared to equate heaven, nor even final beatitude, much less the blessing sought for by mortals, which tend to be like, money, some woman or man, something, much, much lesser blessings, with the fellowship, even enjoyed for half a moment, of those who have developed an attachment for the Lord. May we enjoy the company of those whose sins have been washed away by immersing their soul in your glories, and their body in the Ganga flowing from your feet, which absolve one of all sins. Nay, who are imbued with compassion for all creatures and are possessed of a mind free from likes and dislikes and endowed with virtues. Let this be your boon to us. The contemplative soul, whose mind is neither distracted by external objects nor loses itself in a spell of drowsiness, exceedingly pure and blessed as it is by the loving devotion of such devotees, easily and surely succeeds in realizing your true nature at this stage. You are the same infinite Brahman in whom is manifested this universe and who shines through the universe, nay, who is supreme effulgence and is all-pervading like ether. O Lord, we know you to be absolute, you who evolve this meaning the universe, all that exists, evolve all this, sustain it and again dissolve it, as though it were real, yourself remaining unchanged, through your Maya, that assumes multitudinous forms and gives rise to the notion of difference, yet which is powerless against you. They alone are well versed in the Vedas and the Tantras, who, devoted as they are to the path of action and imbued with faith, duly adore perfection through a network of rituals, this very form of yours, which is hinted at by the 5 elements, the Indriyas, and the mind. You are the one primeval person, whose energy lies dormant. It is by the said Maya that Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas get differentiated, and it is from the same Maya that this universe, consisting of Mahattattva, the ego, ether, the air, fire, water, and earth, the devas and the rishis, and the multitudes of living beings, springs up. By a part of your being you have entered the body, which is of four kinds. The four kinds of body is a ancient Indian classification of sweat-born, or meaning like microorganisms like bacteria and so on that live in and on the bodies of others. Oviparous, viviparous, and those that sprout from soil, and has been brought forth by your own energy. It is therefore that they call that ray of your being residing in the body as the Purusha or Jiva, which enjoys through the senses the trivial pleasures of sense, like the honey collected by bees. Your true nature can be inferred. Possessed of most tremendous velocity and irresistible like a hurricane, it is you who destroy the worlds, sweeping off the various creatures by the creatures, even as the wind sweeps off the clouds. In other words, that creatures kill each other. That's the nature of how life works, biological life at least. Alert as the serpent that grabs a rat, licking the ends of its lips through hunger, you as death suddenly overtake the jiva who is utterly careless, engrossed as he is in the thought of his projects, and being totally given up to the pleasures of sense is seized with inordinate greed. What wise man who regards his body as wearing away through neglect of you would abandon your lotus feet, which our ancestor has adored through fear of bondage in the shape of worldly existence, and which the 14 Manus have worshipped without reasoning? Without reasoning means like without questioning, without deviating from said worship. The universe is as if dead through fear of Lord Rudra. Therefore, to us who know this, O all-pervading Supreme Spirit, you are the fearless resort. And so with that, he concludes the hymn that he's quoting and tells the prachetas, go on repeating this hymn with the purest of motives, O princes, discharging your sacred duties with your mind set on the Lord. This will do you good. Worship Sri Hari alone, the spirit dwelling in your heart and present in all creatures, extolling and meditating on him again and again. Having received this hymn called the Yoga Desha, as imparted by me, and retaining it, repeat it reverently, all of you, with a concentrated mind, observing the vow of hermits. Intent on multiplying his progeny, it was the glorious Brahmana, the lord of the Prajapatis, who taught it at the dawn of creation to us, his sons, Bhrigu and others, all of whom were keen to push on the work of creation. Enjoined to proceed with the task of procreation, we Prajapatis all evolved various species of living beings, having got rid of ignorance through this very hymn. Even now a man devoted to Lord Vasudeva, and ever repeating it with an attentive and absorbed mind, attains blessedness before long. Of all the blessings here, spiritual enlightenment leading to final beatitude is the highest. He who sails in the bark of wisdom easily crosses the ocean of misery, so difficult to cross. Imbued with reverence, he who dwells upon this hymn in praise of the Lord, sung by me, will be able to propitiate Sri Hari, so difficult to please. A man who is steady of mind obtains whatever he desires from that Lord, the sole repository of blessings, when he is celebrated through this hymn sung by me and is highly pleased thereby. Rising before daybreak and full of faith, any mortal who listens to or recites it with joined palms is freed from all shackles of karma. Repeating with a concentrated mind this hymn in praise of the Supreme Purusha, the Oversoul, sung by me, O princes, practice austerities. Thereby you will attain in the long run the object sought for. Thus ends the 24th discourse entitled The Hymn Sung by Lord Rudra in Book 4 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 25. Introductory part of the parable of Puranjana. Maitreya continued. Having thus instructed the Prachetas, the sons of Barhishad, and duly worshipped by them, Lord Shiva, the destroyer of the universe, disappeared on that very spot while the princes stood gazing. Repeating the hymn of praise to the Lord, sung by Sri Rudra, the god of destruction, all the Prachetas practiced austerities for a myriad years, standing in water. Ovidura, the sage Narada, a knower of the truth of the spirit and compassionate by nature, admonished Prachinabarhi, their father, whose mind was attached to rituals. He said, "What good, O king, do you seek for yourself through rituals? Welfare lies in the cessation of sorrow and the attainment of happiness, and such welfare is not expected from them." The king replied, "I know not the supreme good, O blessed one, my mind being distracted by rituals. Pray impart to me that pure wisdom whereby I may be freed from karma, sticking to the life of a householder where one performs actions prompted by interested motives, and regarding sons, wife, and riches as the object of human pursuit. An ignorant man fails to attain the highest good and wanders in the pathway leading to transmigration." Narada said, "O ruler of men, O king, behold the multitudes of creatures slaughtered by you in thousands as animals for sacrifice, merciless that you are. Retaining the memory of your cruelty, they eagerly wait for you, their anger having been roused, and will tear you with their horns made of steel when you have departed to the other world. In this connection, I will narrate to you the following old legend. Hear from me as I tell you the story of Puranjana. O king, there was a monarch of wide renown, Puranjana by name. He had a friend named Avignata, so called because his activities were unknown. Indeed, Avignata means unknown in Sanskrit. Searching for an abode, the king ranged over the globe. When he did not find a suitable place, he felt dejected, as it were. Seeking after pleasures, he rejected as many cities as there existed on the earth's surface, holding them unfit to yield such enjoyments as he sought. One day he saw on the southern ridges of the Himalayan range a city provided with 9 gates and exhibiting all the marks of a good city. Surrounded by a defensive wall, groves, watchtowers, and moats, eye-holes, and arched gateways, it was dense on all sides with houses having turrets of gold, silver, and steel. The floor of its mansions being paved with sapphires, crystals, cat's eye gems, pearls, emeralds, and rubies, the city was radiant with splendor as Bhagavati, the city of the Nagas. It was provided with assembly halls, crossroads and highways, gambling houses, bazaars and rest houses, banners waving from flagstaffs, and terraces built of coral. Now, there was a park in the outskirts of the city, which was full of celestial trees and creepers, and spotted with lakes, echoing the noise of warbling birds and humming bees. The margin of its lotus ponds was enriched with trees whose boughs and young leaves waved gently in the breeze blowing from flower beds and charged with the spray from cool cascades. There was no molestation caused in that park by the various species of wild animals, since there they were all wedded to nonviolence, like hermits. The passerby thought himself invited to that place by the notes of its cuckoos. In that garden he beheld a most charming damsel, who had arrived by chance, coming with 10 attendants, each of whom was the spouse of 100 wives. She was guarded on all sides by a 5-hooded serpent that was a bodyguard to her. 16 years of age and capable of assuming any form at will, she was out in quest of a husband. The girl had a shapely nose, beautiful teeth, lovely cheeks, and a charming countenance, and bore in her symmetrical ears the splendor of earrings. Clad in a tawny skirt and adorned with a girdle of gold, that lady, with well-formed hips and swarthy of complexion, looked like a goddess as she walked with her feet making a tinkling sound by their anklets. Moving with the gait of an elephant, she covered, with the end of her garment out of modesty, her close-knit, symmetrical, and spherical breasts, which bespoke the advent of youth. Pierced by her affectionate sidelong glances, with the outer corner of her eyes serving as its shaft, and her eyebrows dancing for love as the bow, the gallant youth Puranjana spoke in a winning tone to the girl, who looked charming with her bashful smiles, and said to her, "Who are you, O pretty damsel with eyes resembling the petals of a lotus? Whose daughter are you, and whence are you here, O noble girl? Tell me, O timid one, what you intend to do in the outskirts of the city. Who are these 10 attendants of yours, led by that great warrior who makes the 11th? Again, who are these young women, O beautiful lady? And what about this serpent going before you? Are you Hri, or the goddess presiding over bashfulness or modesty, or Parvati, or Vak, or Rama, living in seclusion? These are all various major goddesses. Living in seclusion like a hermitess in this forest in search of your lord, who has realized all his ambitions by merely craving for your feet. Where has the lotus bud dropped from the tips of your fingers? No, you are none of these, O damsel with well-formed thighs, since you touch the ground. It's often said in the Shastras that a way to recognize devas moving among humans is that their feet don't quite touch the ground. They float like an inch. Also that they don't sweat. Be pleased to grace this city with myself, an eminent hero of extraordinary prowess, even as Sri adorns the transcendental realm with her Lord Vishnu. Instigated by you through your playful eyebrows, conspiring with your bashful and loving smiles, the all-powerful love is harassing me, whose mind has been distracted by your sidelong glances. Therefore show your grace to me, O beautiful one. Raise and show me your sweet-tongued countenance, with its charming eyebrows and eyes possessed of lovely pupils, which is screened by dark tresses hanging low, and not facing me through bashfulness, O damsel with bright smiles. Narada continued. Enamored of the heroic Puranjana, who thus courted her like one who had lost one's patience, the girl smilingly greeted him, O valiant monarch. We are not fully aware of our own progenitor, or ornament among men, nor do we know the progenitor of anyone else, who is responsible for the family name no less than for the name of the progeny. We only know our being present here today, nothing beyond that. Nor do we know him who built this city for our abode, O brave one. These men and women are my male and female companions, O courteous one. When I am asleep, this serpent keeps awake, guarding the city. Thank heaven you have come. May all be well with you. With the help of my kinsfolk, I shall secure for you the sensuous pleasures you long to obtain, O vanquisher of foes. Occupy you this city with 9 gates, O Lord, enjoying for 100 years the sensuous pleasures made available by me. Whom else save you should I delight? Him who is ignorant of enjoyment, unwise, unmindful of the future life, and heedless about his duty for the morrow, a mere brute. It is here, indeed, that one attains religious merit, worldly riches, and sense gratification, dharma, artha, and kama, the joy of having a son, the privilege of eating the leavings of a sacrifice, and fame, as well as worlds that are free from misery and sin, all of which are unknown to recluses. The wise declare the life of a householder as the asylum affording protection in this world to the pitris, devas, rishis, human beings, and other living beings, as well as to the householder himself. What woman of my category, O brave one, would not accept for her husband a renowned, generous, charming, and beloved personality like you? What woman's mind on this earth would not cling to your arms, resembling the body of a serpent, O mighty armed one? It is in order to wipe out the agony of helpless and forlorn creatures with your smiling glances imbued with compassion that you move about. Narada went on. Having thus signified on that spot their mutual agreement, the couple entered that city and rejoiced for 100 years. Glorified everywhere in a sweet voice by panegyrists, Puranjana sported in the midst of damsels and entered a river during the hot weather. For the passage of whosoever was the ruler in the city to other territories, 7 gates of that city had been constructed in the upper part and 2 in the lower. 5 entrances opened towards the east, 1 towards the south, another towards the north, and 2 faced the west. I mention their names to you, O king. 2 of the eastern gates, Kadyota and Avirmukhi, had been built at the same place. Accompanied by Dyuman, Puranjana traveled to the land of Vibhrajita through these 2 gates. 2 more portals in the east, Nalini and Nalini, had been constructed adjacently. Accompanied by Avadhuta, he sallied forth by them to the territory of Saurabha. The 5th entrance facing the east was called Mukhya. Accompanied by Rasagnya and Vipana, the ruler of the city went by this to the lands of Apana and Bahudana. Pitrahu was the gate in the south of the city. Accompanied by Srutadhara, Puranjana went thereby to the kingdom of South Panchala. The entrance in the north of the city was called by the name of Devahu. Accompanied by again Srutadhara, Puranjana went by this gate to the dominion of North Panchala. Asuri was the name of the gate on the west. Accompanied by Durmada, Puranjana proceeded by that gate to the territory of Gramaka. The other entrance on the west was called Nirti. Accompanied by Lubdhaka, Puranjana moved by that gate to the country known by the name of Vaishasa. Two of the city gates, Nirvak and Peshaskrit, led to blind alleys. The lord of those endowed with vision, Puranjana went about and did everything with the help of these two. Whenever he went to the gymnasium, accompanied by Vishuchina, who was the principal, the head of the servants in charge, he gave way to infatuation, complacence, and joy, induced by his wife and children. Thus deeply attached to action and beguiled, the foolish king, whose mind was given over to sense gratification, did exactly what the queen did. So on her drinking wine, he too drank wine, and was overcome by intoxication. And now, on her dining, he took his dinner, and on her proceeding to eat something crisp, he too ate something crisp along with her. Sometimes when she sang, he sang, and on other occasions when she wept, he wept. Again, on her laughing, he laughed, and on her prattling, he too prattled like her. Now when she ran, he ran, and on her standing, he too likewise stood. On her going to bed, he similarly went to bed, and now on her sitting down, he likewise sat down. Sometimes when she listened, he listened, and on her seeing something, he too saw the same thing. Again, on her proceeding to smell something, he smelt it, and on some occasions when she touched something, he touched it. Now when his wife appeared sorrowful, he became sorrowful after her, like one afflicted. On her rejoicing, he too similarly rejoiced, and on her feeling happy, he too felt happy. Thus deluded by the queen, and having completely lost his own nature, the foolish king helplessly and involuntarily imitated his wife like a monkey kept for her amusement. Thus ends the 25th discourse, forming part of the parable of Puranjana. You might be starting to gather what this story is about. Discourse 26, Puranjana goes a-hunting to the forest, and the queen gets angry with him. Narada resumed. Armed with a mighty bow, clad in his gold armor, equipped with his inexhaustible quiver and attended by his 11th general, Puranjana one day mounted his car drawn by 5 horses and fit for swift marches, and proceeded to the forest called Panchaprastha. The car had a pair of shafts, 2 wheels, 1 axle tree, 3 flagstaffs, 5 cords, a single rein, 1 charioteer, a seat, 2 poles, 5 recesses, and 7-fold protection. It was capable of 5 kinds of motion, and was provided with appurtenances of gold. Every detail in this story, by the way, every description of the chariot, of the gates, everyone's name, is all very specific symbolism. It'll come out what it all means. Leaving behind his wife, who did not deserve such treatment as to be left behind, the proud king, who was totally given up to the passion for game, set about hunting there, bow and arrow in hand. Following the ways of demons, he became hard-hearted and cruel, and killed with his sharp arrows a number of wild animals in the woods. The scriptures restrict the scope of hunting and lay down that a king, if he is excessively fond of hunting, may kill in the forest according to his needs such animals as are fit for sacrifice on sacred occasions recognized in the scriptures. The wise man who performs his duties thus defined is not tainted by that action, O ruler of kings, thanks to the enlightenment that dawns on him. Full of egotism, he who does his duties otherwise is bound by the actions that he performs. Having fallen into transmigration and deprived of his judgment, he goes down in the scale of spiritual evolution. The slaughter of wild animals that had their bodies lacerated by his arrows decorated with variegated feathers and died with great pain was something hard to bear for those possessed of a tender heart. While killing hares, boars, bisons, gayals, gayals are basically a type of wild, undomesticated bovine, black antelopes and porcupines fit for sacrifice, and many other creatures not so fit, he felt fatigued. Exhausted with hunger and thirst, he desisted from the cruel act and returned home. And when he had finished his bath and duly taken his meals, he lay down to rest and was relieved of his fatigue. He graced his person with perfume, sandal paste, and a wreath of flowers, etc., and well adorned all over, he then thought of his queen. Sated with refreshments, delighted with perfume, etc., and highly proud of his royal state, and his mind seized with passion, he missed his beautiful wife, who helped him in discharging the duties of a householder. As if sad at heart, he inquired of the ladies of the gymnasium, O King Vedishat, since Narada is telling this to King Vedishat or Prachinabarhi. Is everything well with you and your mistress, O charming damsels? The household wealth in this house looks not so splendid as before at this moment. What wise man would stay like a miserable creature in his house, neglected as a chariot without wheels, etc., if there was no mother or wife looking upon her husband as God in that house? Where is that lovely lady who cheers me up when I am drowning in an ocean of misery, brightening my intellect at every step? The ladies replied, O Lord of men, we know not what your beloved wife is bent upon. See her lying on the bare ground, O slayer of foes. Narada went on. Puranjana, whose judgment had been shaken through attachments to his wife, was sorely perturbed to see her lying unkempt on the ground. With an aching heart he tried to pacify her with soft words, but failed to perceive in his beloved queen any sign of anger prompted by love towards him. The gallant youth then gradually began to cajole her, skilled as he was in conciliation. He touched her feet, and having seated her in his lap and caressed her, spoke. Puranjana said, Unlucky indeed are those servants whom, when they have committed some offense, their masters, O fair one, care not to punish by way of correction, recognizing them as subject to their control. Punishment meted out to servants by their master is an act of supreme grace. He who resents it is a fool in that he fails to recognize it as a friendly act, O lovely one. Therefore, O proud lady with beautiful teeth and graceful eyebrows, reveal to us who are yours, your face with a prominent nose and a sweet tongue, hanging under the weight of love and bashfulness, charming with smiling glances and decked with dark bee-like tresses. I shall inflict punishment, O spouse of a warrior, on him who has wronged you, unless he belongs to the Brahmana race. I do not find him immune from fear, much less rejoicing in all the three worlds, or beyond them, if he is other than a servant of Lord Vishnu, the slayer of the demon Mura. Never before did I see your face without its tilaka, dull, cheerless, frowning with anger, untrimmed and sullen. Nor did I see even your lovely breasts soiled with tears of grief, and your lips, ruddy as the ripe bimba fruit, without their saffron-like hue, meaning that she's not wearing any makeup. Therefore be gracious to me, your loved one, even though I have committed an offense against you, in that I went out a-hunting of my own will, seized with a passion for sport. What woman longing for union would not accept for befitting services her beloved one, who was under her sway and had been deprived of his patience by the vehemence of love? Thus ends the 26th discourse. Discourse 27, the raid of Chandavega against the capital of Puranjana and the story of Kalakanya. Narada resumed. Having thus brought Puranjana completely under sway by her feminine graces, O great king, Puranjani enjoyed life, bringing delight to her spouse. King Puranjana, O Prachinabarhi, greeted her when she came up to him with a bright countenance, having washed herself well and fitted herself with auspicious decoration, and gratified. Embraced by her, he threw his arms about her neck, and infatuated by her secret amatory counsel, he did not notice the rapid movement of time, which was difficult to master, knowing not whether it was day or night, his mind being completely possessed by that young woman. Lying on a splendid couch, with the arm of his queen serving as a pillow, the over-ambitious and valiant Puranjana, whose arrogance knew no bounds, accounted his wife the supreme object of his life, and overpowered as he was with infatuation, he did not know what was his and what was alien to him. While he thus tasted sensual delights with her, his mind clouded by passion, his youth passed away in half a second, as it were, O King of Kings. Emperor Puranjana begot through that Puranjani 1,100 sons and 110 daughters. These latter brought glory to their parents, the daughters, brought glory to their parents and were endowed with a noble character and virtues like generosity and so on. They became known as Pauranjanis, a ruler of men. By this time, half his life was spent. That ruler of Panchala duly united his sons, who propagated their ancestral line, with brides, and his daughters with suitable bridegrooms. 100 sons were born in due course to each of his sons. By these, the race of Puranjana considerably grew in the land of the Panchalas. Through a deep-seated feeling of mindness in respect of his sons and grandsons, houses, treasury, and dependence, he got attached to the objects of sense more and more. And prompted by manifold desires, he worshipped, as you did, the devas and the pitris, as well as the lords of ghosts, through horrible sacrifices involving animal slaughter, after being consecrated for them. While he thus remained unmindful of all that was conducive to his welfare, his mind being attached to his family, a period of senility stole upon him, a period unwelcome to those who are fond of women. There is a chief of the Gandharvas, known by the name of Chandavega, O king. 360 strong Gandharvas forming his retinue, and Gandharva women equally strong, half of them fair and others dark, pairing with them, ravage by rotation a city which is well provided with all objects of enjoyment when it was built. When these attendants of Chandavega commenced pillaging the capital of Puranjana, Prajagara the serpent offered resistance. For 100 years, that powerful guard of the city, that serpent, fought single-handed with those 720 Gandharvas. When his relation began to lose strength as a result of his combat with many, Puranjana felt distressed with his dominion and city and kinsmen, and was filled with great anxiety. Being the only drinker at his own capital in the kingdom of Panchala, and thus receiving the tribute brought by his own retainers, that henpecked monarch knew nothing of the impending fear. There was a daughter of Kala, the time spirit, who ranged over the three worlds, desirous of a husband. Nobody would welcome her, O Prachina Barhi. Due to her forbidding nature, she became known in the world by the name of Durbhaga. Accepted by the royal sage Puru, the youngest son of Yayati, she conferred on him the boon of sovereignty, highly pleased. On a certain day, when I had descended to the terrestrial globe from the realm of Brahma, the creator, she, in the course of her peregrination, wooed me, infatuated as she was with passion, even though she knew that I was vowed to perpetual celibacy. Enraged at my refusal, she pronounced a formidable curse, saying, "Having turned a deaf ear to my advances, you shall never stay at one place for long, O sage." Her will crossed, the maid thereafter approached the lord of the Yavanas, Bhaya, or Fear, by name, as instructed by me, and accepted him for her husband, with the words, "I court you, the foremost of the Yavanas, as my coveted husband, O gallant youth. The hope centered by creatures in you never goes in vain. Both he who does not part with and he who refuses to accept that which offers itself as worth giving or taking, according to usage and the Shastras, are ignorant and perverse. The wise feel sorry for them. Therefore, O Blessed One, be gracious to me and accept me, who offer my hand to you. To compassionate the afflicted, that is the sacred duty of a man." Hearing the words addressed by the daughter of Kala, the lord of the Yavanas, who was eager to accomplish the secret mission of the gods, which was to bring about the death of living beings, smilingly replied to her, "With the help of my intuitive vision, I have found out a husband for you. The world does not welcome you because you are inauspicious and despised, since she is the daughter of the time spirit that brings age and everything to an end, which is why no one in the world wants time to pass. Moving about imperceptibly, enjoy you the creation owing its existence to karma. And therefore, everyone in creation will be your husband and under your power. Sally forth with my army, the army of death, and you will bring about the destruction of all created beings. Here is my brother, Prajvara, or mortal fever, and be you sister to me. With you both, and followed by a formidable army, I, Death, shall range over this whole world unperceived." Discourse 28. Puranjana is reborn as a woman and attains liberation through the teaching of his friend Avignata. Narada continued. Accompanied by Prajvara and the daughter of Kala, the hordes of the lord of the Yavanas, Bhaya by name, who were the agents of fate, O Barhishman, ranged over this globe. On a certain day, O king, they besieged with speed the capital of Puranjana, rich in earthly enjoyments and guarded by the old serpent Prajagara. The daughter of Kala, too, took possession of the city of Puranjana by force. Overcome by her, any man would become powerless at once. The Yavanas, the troops of Bhaya, the troops of fears, entered the city, which was being forcibly enjoyed by her, by time, through the entrances on all sides, and oppressed the entire population very much. The city being thus tormented, Puranjana, who loved it as his own self, and who had a large family and was troubled with the feeling of mindness, fell a prey to manifold agonies. Embraced by that maid, the daughter of time, and divested of glory, Puranjana felt wretched, his mind being engrossed in the pleasures of sense. Forcibly robbed of his power and affluence by the Gandharvas and the Yavanas, he lost his power of discrimination. Seeing his city destroyed, his sons and grandsons, servants and ministers rebellious and disrespectful, his wife cold and indifferent, his body caught in the snares of that maid, time, and the land of Panchala overrun by the enemy, he was plunged in anxiety which was hard to overcome and found no remedy for it. Miserably hankering after the objects of enjoyment, rendered insipid by that maid, time, and affectionately taking care of his progeny and wife, the king lost his spiritual moorings as well as the affection of his people, and reluctantly proceeded to quit that city, which had been taken possession of by the Gandharvas and Yavanas, and devastated by the daughter of Kala. Prajvara, the elder brother of the lord of the Yavanas, who bore the name of Bhaya, made his appearance and set fire to the entire city with the intent to please his brother. So in other words, the mortal fever set fire to the city in order to please his brother Fear. When the city was in flames with fever, Puranjana, the head of his family, suffered agony with the entire city, his own retinue, the mistress of the family, and his sons and daughters. When Prajagara's own abode was besieged by the Yavanas and the city was occupied by the daughter of Kala, the said guard of the city felt sorely distressed as he closed with Prajvara. When he was unable to defend the city while on that post and found himself in great straits, he shook violently and sought to fly away therefrom, even as a serpent would try to escape from the hollow of a tree on fire. With his limbs enfeebled and himself deprived of his manliness by the Gandharvas, he actually wept when intercepted by his enemies, the Yavanas, O king. Puranjana, the master of his house, whose mind has been perverted by the thoughts of I and mine in respect of his house, etc., felt wretched when the hour of separation from his wife came, and thought of his daughters, sons and grandsons, daughters-in-law, sons-in-law, and retainers, house, treasury, and other belongings, whatever remained in his name only. He thought, when I am gone to the other world, how should this widowed mother of the family eke out her existence, lamenting the lot of her children? Depending on me, she would not take her food until I had been fed, nor would she bathe until I had taken my bath. She would get awfully frightened when I was angry, and hold her tongue out of fear when scolded by me. She would admonish me when my judgment failed, and would grow emaciated through grief when I was away from home. Will she be able to follow the way of the householders without me, even though she is the mother of heroic sons? And how will these helpless sons and daughters, who have no one else to depend upon, survive when I am gone? On the other hand, they will perish like the inmates of a broken vessel in mid-ocean. While Puranjana was sorrowing thus with a feeble mind, even though he should not have done so, there came up the lord of the Yavanas, Bhaya, or Fear by name, bent upon seizing him. While he was being taken by the Yavanas to their own place, bound as a beast, his attendants followed him, sorrowing in extreme perturbation. When the serpent that had been held up deserted the city and came up to his master, the city was completely destroyed after him and reduced to the elements. While being forcibly dragged by the mighty Yavana, Puranjana failed to remember his old friend and companion, the unknown, seized as he was with infatuation. The sacrificial animals that had been mercilessly slaughtered by him now chopped him with axes in anger, remembering that cruelty of his. Steeped in ignorance to which there was no limit or end, and having lost his memory, he suffered agony for numberless years, his mind being perverted through attachment to his wife. Mentally clinging to her alone even at that moment, he was then born as the most beautiful girl in the house of the ruler of Vidarbha, a veritable lion among kings. Malayadhvaja, a ruler of the Pandya kingdom, who had conquered his enemies' cities, married this princess of Vidarbha, who was offered as the prize of valor, after vanquishing all the other princes in battle. Through her, Malayadhvaja begot a lovely daughter with dark eyes, and 7 younger sons who became the 7 rulers of the Dravida kingdom. 100 million sons were born to each one of these latter, by whose descendants the earth will be ruled over for a whole manvantara and beyond it. Agastya married the firstborn daughter of Malayadhvaja, constant in virtue. Of her was born the sage Dridhatyuta, who had a son, Idmavaha by name. Having divided the earth among his sons, that royal sage Malayadhvaja betook himself to the Kulachala mountain, eager to worship Lord Sri Krishna. Abandoning her house, sons, and luxuries, the lovely-eyed daughter of the king of Vidarbha followed the lord of the Pandyas, even as moonlight follows the moon. 3 rivers, Chandravasa, Tamraparni, and Vatodaka by name, flow in that region. cleansing the impurities of both his body and mind with their holy waters every day, and subsisting on bulbs and seeds, roots and fruits, flowers and leaves, as well as on blades of grass and water. He practiced austerities, which gradually emaciated his body. He triumphed over pairs of opposites, such as heat and cold, storm and rain, hunger and thirst, the agreeable and the disagreeable, pleasure and pain, viewing all with the same eye. With his latent desires eradicated through asceticism and worship, and having controlled his senses, breath, and mind through the religious vows and the various forms of self-discipline, meaning through the yamas and niyamas of yoga, he united himself with the infinite Brahman. He sat motionless like a stump at one place for 100 celestial years. And having found delight in Lord Vasudeva, he ceased to be conscious of everything else. With the light of pure wisdom imparted by the divine Sri Hari himself as a preceptor, which shed luster all round in his heart, O king, he perceived the self, who is the witness even of the activities of the mind, as illumining the body, etc., and distinct from them, even as a man sees himself apart from his severed head in a dream, and verily grew indifferent to everything else. He realized himself as one with the transcendent Brahman, and the transcendent Brahman as identical with himself, and giving up even this consciousness, actually rose above this world. Renouncing sensuous enjoyments, the aforesaid Vaidarbhi, the daughter of the king of Vidarbha, who looked upon her husband as a veritable god, lovingly waited upon her spouse, Malayadvaja, who was conscious of his paramount duty. Clad in tatters and emaciated through fasting and other vows, her hair stuck together in knots, she shone beside her husband like a subdued flame by the side of a flameless fire. Going up to her most beloved spouse, who was seated in a steady posture even when he had expired, the lady waited upon him as before, not knowing that he was dead. When she did not feel any warmth in the feet of her husband while serving them, she was much perturbed at heart, like a doe that had strayed away from its herd. Lamenting her lot as she was now friendless and miserable, she felt greatly alarmed and wept loudly in that forest, bathing her breasts in tears. Arise, stand up, O royal sage. Be pleased to protect this earth girt by the ocean, afraid as she is of robbers and renegade Kshatriyas. Weeping and wailing thus, that young woman, who had followed her spouse to the forest, fell prostrate at her husband's feet and shed tears. Piling up a pyre of fuel, she laid the body of her husband, and setting fire to it, made up her mind to follow him to the other world, weeping. That very moment, an old friend of hers, a Brahmana who had mastered himself, appeared there, and soothing her with sweet words of consolation, addressed the weeping woman, O king. The Brahmana said, Who are you, and whose daughter may you be? And who is the man lying here whose death you mourned? Do you know me, your friend, with whom indeed you moved about of yore? Can you recall yourself as one who had a companion, of Ignata by name, O friend, leaving whom you went in search of an abode, addicted as you were to earthly enjoyments? You and I, O noble one, were swans living on the bosom of the Manasa lake, the mind lake, and remained there for thousands of years without any shelter. Leaving me, O friend, you came down to the earth with your mind set on carnal pleasures, and in the course of your excursions you saw an abode erected by some woman, with 5 pleasure gardens, 9 entrances, 1 porter, 3 surrounding walls, 6 families of merchants, and 5 marketplaces. It was built with 5 materials and had a woman for its mistress. The objects of the 5 senses constituted its gardens, and the 9 apertures locating the indriyas, meaning the 9 orifices of the body, were its 9 gates. O king, fire, water, and earth were its 3 surrounding walls. The mind and the 5 senses were its 6 merchant families. The 5 organs of action constituted the marketplaces. The elements served as its undecaying materials. Dominated by the intellect, the man who entered this abode ceased to be self-conscious. Overpowered there by the woman, and enjoying life with her, you forgot your divinity heard of in the scriptures. And it is through her fellowship that you have been reduced to this most wretched state, O master of yourself. You are not the daughter of the king of Vidarbha, nor is this hero your husband. Nor are you the spouse of Puranjani, by whom you were held captive in the city of 9 gates. It is a piece of illusion, created by me, under which you thought yourself as a man, and now as a lady. You are neither. You and I are a pair of swans. Realize our true nature. I am you, and you are no other than me. Mark you, you are just the same as I. The wise never perceive the least difference between us. Just as a man sees himself differently in a mirror and in the pupil of another's eye, The difference between us two is of the same type. Admonished thus by the fellow swan, the swan of the Manasa lake was established in his own self and regained his self-consciousness, which had been lost due to his having parted company with his friend. O Prachina Barhi, I have imparted this spiritual truth to you in an indirect manner, for the glorious Lord, the maker of the universe, loves to remain incognito. Prachina Barhi is about to ask that same question, Radha. As long as this next discourse. I think we have time for one more. Discourse 29. Prachina Barhi said, O divine sage, we are unable to follow your teaching correctly. It is the wise alone who can rightly grasp it, not we who are deluded by attachment to the rituals. Narada said, one should understand Puranjana, which literally means city maker, to be the jiva, inasmuch as it is the jiva that produces a stronghold for itself in the shape of a body with 1, 2, 3, 4, or numerous feet, or without any feet, depending on what type of creature. The friend of the jiva, referred to under the name of Avijñata, is God, so-called unknown, because he is not fully known by the jivas as having names, actions, or attributes. They don't understand what God is. When the jiva wished to enjoy all material objects, it thought the human body endowed with 2 hands and 2 feet and 9 apertures is the best among all. One should understand the young woman Puranjani to be the human intellect, which gives rise to the notions of I and mine. Identifying himself with it, the jiva in this body enjoys the sense objects through the senses. The indriyas, which bring about knowledge and action, are the male companions of the intellect. Their activities, their 100 activities each, are her female companions, and the vital air with its 5-fold activity, the prana of the body, is referred to as the 5-hooded serpent. One should understand Brahadbala, the 11th mighty warrior that was waiting upon her, to be the mind, the ruler of both the types of indriyas. The kingdom of Panchala represents the 5 sense objects, in the midst of which stands the city with 9 gates, and so he went out through the various gates of the senses to enjoy the various objects of the senses, which were the countries, the exterior world. The 2 eyes, the 2 nostrils, the 2 ears, and the penis and the anus are the pairs of entrances, and the mouth as the 9th. It is through these gates that the jiva goes out to the objects of senses, accompanied by the indriyas. The companion who went with him, located in each aperture, was the sense that went with him to enjoy those objects. The 2 eyes, the 2 nostrils, and the mouth are the 5 gates located in the east, meaning the face of the body, oriented toward the east. The right ear has been spoken of as the southern gate, and the left the northern gate. The 2 openings below have been called the western gates, and they are designated here as the penis and the anus. The Kadyota and Avirmukhi, constructed at one place in this city, correspond to the 2 eyes, and through these, aided by the faculty of vision, the jiva perceives color, which corresponds to the realm called Vibhrajita. The 2 nostrils are the gates Nalini, and odor has been spoken of as the territory of Saurabha. The olfactory sense is the companion known by Avadhuta. The mouth is the gate called Mukhya. The faculty of speech is the companion Vipana, and the organ of taste is the friend Rasagnya. The use of the tongue is the territory mentioned in the story by the name of Apana, and food of various kinds is the realm known as Bahudana. The right ear is the gate called Pitrahu, and the left is the gate Devahu. The scriptures dealing with the path of worldly activity and those preaching quietism have been spoken of as South Panchala and North Panchala. Listening to these through the ear, which has been spoken of as the companion Srutadhara, the jiva takes severally to the path of the Pitris and the path of the Devas. The membrum virile is the western gate called Asuri, meaning the sexual organs. Penis, since we're talking about a male example here, is the Asuri gate. The act of copulation, or sex, is the territory called Gramaka. The faculty of procreation has been spoken of as the companion Durmada, while the anus has been referred to under the name of Nirti, the other western gate. The infernal region is the territory called Vaishasa, while the organ of defecation is the companion named Lubdhaka. Hear from me about the 2 entrances leading to blind alleys. They are the hands and feet wherewith the human soul severally works and moves about. The heart is the gynasium, and the mind has been spoken of as the principal waiter therein, Vishuchi or Vishuchina. Identifying itself with the qualities, sattva, rajas, and tamas of the mind, the jiva gives way herein severally to complacence, joy, and infatuation. Complacence to tamas, joy, and sattva, and infatuation and rajas. According as the equilibrium of the intellect is disturbed, or it disturbs the senses in its turn, the jiva that is affected by its qualities is compelled to follow its changes, although the jiva is actually a mere witness. The body is the chariot, having the senses of perception for its horses and coursing swiftly like the year, though really motionless. The two varieties of karma, good and evil, are its two wheels. The three gunas are its three flagstaffs, and the five vital airs are its five cords. The mind is its rein, the intellect the charioteer, the heart the seat, the pairs of opposites, the poles to which the yoke is fixed, the objects of the five senses, the recesses into which the weapons are deposited, the seven constituent elements, the child, blood, flesh, fat, bone, marrow, and semen, or reproductive fluids in general, make the seven protective sheaths, and the five organs of action, the tongue, the hands, the feet, and the organs of copulation and defecation are its five kinds of outward motion. The jiva runs after the mirage, followed by the 10 indriyas in the mind, as his army, and unlawfully enjoying the five forms of sensuous pleasure, which have been figuratively spoken of as the slaughtering of animals. The year, which symbolizes time, is referred to as Chandavega, this chief of the Gandharvas who besieges the city of the body. The days and nights have been spoken of as the 360 male and the same number of female Gandharvas, forming his retinue, which steal the life by their rotation. Old age is the daughter of Kala, whom the world does not welcome anywhere. Death is the person of the Yavana chief, Fear, accepted her as a sister for the destruction of the world. Mental anguishes and physical disorders are the Yavanas, the mobilized troops of the chief, Fear. And the fever of two kinds is Prajvara, who is described as having a swift career in tormenting living beings. The two kinds here are Shittajvara, which is cold fever, and Dahajvara, which is hot fever. Afflicted thus by manifold sufferings brought about by divine agencies or other fellow beings, as well as those relating to one's own body or mind, and enveloped in ignorance, the jiva dwells in the body for 100 years, as a general maximum, bound by the sense of I and mine. Attributeless, the jiva ascribes to itself the attributes of the vital airs, the indriyas, and the mind, and remains contemplating on the trivial pleasures of sense and performing actions of various kinds in order to secure them. Not realizing the Lord, its supreme teacher and very self, when the jiva that is self-seeing gets attached to the modes of prakriti, it identifies itself with those qualities and helplessly performs sattvika, rajasika, and tamasika actions, and is born according to those actions. Sometimes, through sattvika actions, it attains to spheres abounding in light. Now it goes to worlds which lead to suffering and involve exertion through action, and now it is hurled into regions dense with darkness and sorrow. The deluded jiva is sometimes a male, now a female, and it is without sex, either as a deva or as a human being, or in a subhuman species, its birth being determined by its past actions in the mode of prakriti. Just as a poor, without sex is not exactly an accurate translation. What it's saying here is born in the nara prakriti of a male nature, or in the nari prakriti of a female nature, or is born in the tritiya prakriti, meaning transgender or intersex or some type of other creature that has totally other genders and so on, as a deva or a human or other species. The birth being determined by its past actions and the mode of prakriti. Just as a poor dog seized with hunger and wandering from door to door receives a beating with a cudgel or cooked rice, just depending on its fate, so does the jiva whose heart is possessed of by the demon of desire reaps a welcome or unwelcome destiny, ranging by paths high and low through the upper or the lower or the middle regions. There is no freedom for the jiva from even one of the three types of sufferings, those brought about by divine agencies, those inflicted by one's fellow beings, and then those caused by one's own body or mind. Even if there is a remedy in particular cases, it only proves to be the precursor of another suffering. Just as a man carrying a heavy load on his head may place it on one of his shoulders, so are all remedies. Like, it might feel better at first, but it's not going to solve your suffering long term. Even as a dream in a dream constitutes only a change from one dream experience to another, but does not bring about the cessation of dreaming, so mere action is no ultimate remedy for actions, both being conceived in ignorance, O pure-hearted monarch. Just as for a man roving about in the dream world with the mind which conditions his soul, there is no cessation of dream experiences, so also transmigration does not cease, even though the phenomena of the world have no reality, no more than dreams. Now, freedom from ignorance, ignorance which brings in its train a chain of evils in the form of transmigration to the eternally existent soul, is secured through supreme devotion to the Lord, the Guru. Contact firmly established with the Lord through devotion will automatically induce aversion to the pleasures of sense and bring enlightenment. That contact through bhakti, depending as it does on the stories of the immortal Lord, becomes an accomplished fact before long, O royal sage, for him who devoutly listens to or reads such stories every day. In a place where there are pious and pure-hearted devotees whose mind is impatient to repeat and listen to the praises of the Lord, O king, there flow in all directions streams of pure nectar-like stories of Lord Vishnu or Madhusudana, recited by exalted souls. Hunger and thirst, fear, grief, and infatuation never afflict those who drink in such stories with intent ears knowing no satiation, O Prachina Barhi. Ever harassed by these natural enemies, people do not indeed take delight in the ocean of the nectarine stories of Sri Hari. Brahma himself, Lord Shiva, Swayambhuva Manu, Daksha, and the other Prajapatis, Sanaka, and other sages vowed to perpetual celibacy, and expositors of the Vedas, Marichi, Atri, Angira, Pulastya, Pulaha, Kratu, Bhrigu, and Vasishta, including myself, all masters of speech, have not been able even to this day to behold the Supreme Lord, the seer of all, in spite of our efforts to perceive him through asceticism, worship, and concentration of mind, meaning perceive him fully comprehend him, since many of them have seen his darshan in various stories that we've already heard. Moving about in the vast expanse of the Veda, the depth of which cannot be easily sounded, and worshipping the forms of Indra and other devas endowed with characteristics as indicated in the texts of the Vedas, we fail to know the Supreme. When contemplated upon in the heart, the Lord showers his grace on some particular individual, the devotee so blessed gives up his faith, however deep-rooted, in the worldly usage as well as in the Vedic rituals. Therefore, O Prachina Barhi, do not regard rituals as real, rituals which, though their accounts are alluring to hear, have no relation whatsoever with the ultimate reality. They appear as real only through ignorance. Men of impure understanding who speak of the Vedas as devoted to rituals are not truly conversant with the Vedas, inasmuch as they do not know the truth about the spirit, that is their own essence and where dwells Lord Janardana, in other words, which is the same as Lord Janardana. In other words, that they know alone the Karma Kanda of the Vedas, but not the Upanishads. They know the exoteric, but not the esoteric aspect of the Vedas. Having strewn the whole terrestrial globe with blades of kusha grass, their ends turned towards the east, you have grown arrogant and proud of your extensive slaughter of animals. You know nothing about the ritual, nor of what is higher than that. That alone is the ritual which conduces to the pleasure of Sri Hari. That alone is wisdom, which leads to faith in him. Sri Hari is the self as well as the Lord of all embodied beings, and he is their independent cause. The soles of his feet are their asylum, for in them lies the safety of men in this world. Indeed, he is the most loved one, nay, the self, from whom there is not the least fear. And as a matter of fact, he alone is wise who knows this truth. And he who is wise is the Guru. Nay, he is Sri Hari himself. Narada continued. Thus indeed has your question been answered, O jewel among men. Now hear from me as I tell you a hidden truth which has been fully ascertained. Find the deer fondly consorting in a garden of flowers, grazing tiny blades of grass, with its ears charmed by the sweet humming of swarms of bees, going about unmindful of the bloodthirsty wolves before it, and pierced from behind by the shaft of a hunter. O king, you would do well to perceive yourself as one seeking after a dose of sense delight, such as the pleasures of taste and copulation, obtained as a result of actions done with an interested motive, and most insignificant, like the odor of the honey and flowers, and a house full of women sharing the nature of blossoms, and that they fade soon. Nay, pairing with women, you have given your mind to them, your ears completely lured by the exceedingly charming talks of beloved women and children, resembling the sweet humming of swarms of bees. You enjoy life at home, setting no value on the moments of time, culminating in days and nights that prey upon your life like a pack of wolves ahead of you. And here is Death the hunter, stalking you and striking you with his veiled arrow from a distance, and lo, your heart has been pierced with the same. Thus pondering the career of the deer, restrain your mind within the four walls of your heart, and the stream of your ear in the mind. Bid adieu to the life of a householder where you hear stories of unrighteous people. please the Lord and gradually withdraw from everything else. King Prachinabarhi said, I have heard and pondered, O holy sage, on what you have said. My gurus who instructed me in the rituals are not aware of this. Had they known it, wherefore should they have failed to teach the same to me? The great doubt raised in my mind by their words on the subject has been fully resolved by you, O Brahmana. Even sages are bewildered in a domain which is beyond the reach of the senses. Leaving here the body by which the jiva performs actions, he reaps the consequences in a future life through another body. This doctrine of the knowers of Veda is heard of everywhere. Whatever action recommended in the Vedas is performed goes out of sight and is no longer visible. How can a thing which has altogether disappeared lead good or evil consequences? Narada replied, the jiva itself experiences consequences of its actions hereafter through the same subtle body, the mind by which he performs actions and which continues uninterrupted. Just as a man ceases to identify himself with this body which remains lying asleep and breathing, a man in a dream stops identifying with the body which is sleeping and breathing in bed, and experiences the fruit of his actions which are stored in his mind in the form of mental impressions, which manifest as dreams. So does he reap the fruit of his actions done in a previous life, which he no longer remembers, through another body similar to this, or belonging to a different species. The same way that he doesn't remember his past lives, and yet their impressions color his current experience, the same way that a man dreaming doesn't remember that he's dreaming, and yet what happened to him during his past waking totally determines his experience in the dream. Whatever body the jiva cleaves to with his mind, saying, these are mine and this is I, he also ascribes to himself the actions performed through that body, whence follows his rebirth, because then he binds himself with his actions. Just as a mind is inferred from both the types of activities of the indriyas, so are the actions wrought through a previous body inferred from the propensities of the mind. In other words, you can tell what you did in your last life by the propensities, by the vasanas and sanskaras that you're born with, your tendencies that carry over from life to life. What has nowhere been experienced and is unseen and unheard of in this life is sometimes perceived with the mind in its actual form and character, such as in a dream or a vision. Therefore, O king, be positive in your mind that such an object was experienced in a previous life by that jiva identified with the subtle body. For an object that has not been experienced can never flash on the mind. The very mind of a man, God bless you, reveals his former existences as well as the future ones in the case of the man who is going to be reborn, and even so the liberation of the man who is not going to be so reborn. Sometimes a thing unseen and unheard of in this world in relation to a particular place, time, or action is seen flashing on one's mind. How this happens should be inferred, and does not disprove in any way the proposition enunciated above. Such objects alone are as perceptible by the senses, flash on the mind in groups in order of succession, and disappear. All embodied beings are endowed with a mind. On a mind established in the quality of sattva, unmixed with rajas and tamas, and staying by the side of the Lord, the whole of the universe flashes, being united as it were with the Lord, just as Rahu appears in conjunction with the moon. The feeling of I and mine, inhering in the jiva, does not cease so long as the subtle body, which has existed from time without beginning, and which is a product of the three gunas and a conglomerate of the intellect, the mind, the indriyas, and the five subtle elements, persists. During sleep, in the unconscious state and in agony, as well as at the time of death and high fever, the I consciousness does not manifest itself due to the suspension of sense activity. The senses being not fully developed during gestation and infancy too, the conditioning ego appearing in the form of the 10 indriyas in the mind in a young child is not distinctly perceived in those periods any more than the orb of the moon on the last night of a lunar month. Even though the world of senses does not really exist, birth and death does not cease for the jiva who is engrossed in the thought of the pleasures of senses, any more than the reverse is experienced in a dream until one wakes up. In this way, the subtle body, made up of the 5 subtle elements and developed into 16 modifications, the 5 vital airs, the mind, and the 10 indriyas, and which is a product of the 3 gunas, is spoken of as the jiva when the same is endowed with consciousness. It is through this that the jiva assumes and casts off bodies, and it is through this that he experiences joy and sorrow, fear, pleasure, and pain. Just as a caterpillar does not leave its foothold until after it has firmly set its foot on another, the jiva does not give up its identification with the previous body even while dying until it takes another body with the exhaustion of karma. It is the mind alone, O ruler of men, that brings about the birth of living beings. When a jiva resorts to actions again and again, thinking of the pleasures enjoyed through the senses, it is bound by such actions of the body so long as they continue to be performed by it through ignorance. Therefore, in order to get rid of this bondage, worship Sri Hari with all your being, looking on this universe as one with him, inasmuch as it proceeds from him, stays in him, and is dissolved in him. Maitreya continued, having revealed the truth about the swans, and taking leave of King Prachinabarhi, glorious Narada, the foremost among the devotees of the Lord, then proceeded to the abode of the Siddhas. Leaving instructions for his sons to take care of the people, the royal sage Prachinabarhi retired to the hermitage of the sage Kapila at the mouth of the Ganga at the coast for practicing asceticism. Constantly and devoutly adoring the lotus feet of Lord Govinda with a concentrated mind and completely rid of attachment, the hero attained a form similar to the Lord's. In other words, Sarupya Moksha. He who reads and he who listens to this allegorical dissertation on the spirit, delivered by the celestial sage, O pure-hearted Vidura, is rid once for all of his subtle body. He who assimilates, as sung, this self-purifying discourse that issued from the lips of the sage Narada, the foremost of celestial seers, or of Deva Rishis, and sanctifies the whole world through the glory of Lord Vishnu, in which confers the highest reward in the form of moksha, is freed from all bondage and no longer revolves in metempsychosis. Thus have I understood the meaning of this wonderful allegorical teaching on the subject of the spirit. With the help of this, the self-identification of a jiva with buddhi is eradicated, and all doubts regarding life after death resolved. Thus ends the 29th discourse, entitled The Dialogue Between King Prachinabarhi and the sage Narada, forming part of the dialogue between Vidura and Maitreya, in Book 4 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. And we can stop there for today. That ends that story. We actually have only a little bit more of Book 4 left, but it's getting a little bit late, so I think we can finish the rest of that at the start of next time.
Thank you so much. This was a nice one. I really like that poetic way of
Yes, yes.
I didn't get it yet in the beginning, you know?
Yeah, it builds slowly.
Yeah.
Kind of a classic Vedic clue is the city of nine gates, because the city of nine gates is an ancient Upanishadic metaphor for the body. And as soon as that gets introduced, it kind of is the clue to start reading it all metaphorically.
Yeah. It took me time to understand, you know. It's like, what is he talking about?
Mm-hmm.
So that was God. I missed it. I had to do something. So
the other swan, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, Paramatman. That too is taken from the Upanishads. The metaphor of the jiva and the Paramatma as two birds. One which gets obsessed with tasting fruits, and is constantly eating sweet and sour fruits, and like craving sweet ones and spitting out and being disgusted by the sour ones. And the other bird which has been free from craving and is just the observer. That's a very ancient Upanishadic symbol of the jiva and the Paramatma.
So the jiva was exhausted in expressing and living, and then he merged, or she merged within the super soul, and then that's how we got enlightened.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yes. Allegorically. Narada made it clear that this is not necessarily talking about a specific person who really lived, but he was using it as a symbolic story.
Yes.
To teach Prachinabarhi. Yeah.
Beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
I think I have to read a couple more times. It's not, you get it.
It's a dense one, full of the symbolism is dense throughout that whole chapter. Every single detail, every name, every description. None of it is just like window dressing. It's all specific philosophical symbolism.
I got everything except this chapter. I couldn't get it. It's just like, wait a minute.
It's most of it is more literal. This is one of the most symbolic and metaphorical chapters that we've had so far in the Bhagavatam. Yeah.
I had to see it as a poet. So then,
Yes.
yeah, then I get it. But
Yeah.
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 Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming.
So yeah, and when you post your YouTube, could you put it on the app and then also
Sure.
your
I can,
link and
yes,
your
I'll link to it.
everything? Yeah, that is, and that way we can subscribe and then you can go right away on YouTube, so you don't need to reload and all that.
Mhm.
Thank you, Devala. Good to see
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
we
thanks
are
for coming.
together. Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
Is there any other comments, or you can stop the recording so we can.